Hello and welcome to Morning Markets. I'm Roger Peterson. Thank you very much for joining us. Here are some of the stories we're tracking for you in the BNN Bloomberg newsroom. The price of oil is moving higher as tanker traffic comes to a stop through the Straits of Hormuz. Following the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran and Iran's response, Saudi Aramco has also halted operations after a drone strike in the area. The escalating conflict is threatening supplies in one of the world's key oil-producing regions, with the strait handling as much as 20% of the world's oil shipments. U.S. President Donald Trump has said combat operations will continue until all U.S. objectives have been met. Shares of Cameco are trading higher, that after the Canadian energy firm signed a $2.6 billion deal with India to supply the country with uranium. Cameco will supply 11,000 tons of the reactor fuel from 2027 through 2035. The agreement follows Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to India and reflects a reset in bilateral ties. Canada and India also agreed to cooperate in sectors including liquefied natural gas, critical minerals, and hydrogen. Shares of Hudbay are off about 4.5% right now. The Toronto-based miner has signed a deal to acquire Arizona Sonoran. The all-stock transaction is valued at just under $1.5 billion US, and we'll see Hudbay pay about $9.35 Canadian per share. Hudbay already owns a nearly 10% stake in the copper mining company. The deal brings its Cactus project together with its existing Arizona business, including its Copper World project. And looking at the markets right now. And the TSX, that's back down in the red. It had snuck above the green line, but off by about a quarter point right now as everybody tries to process what is unfolding in the Middle East. South of the border, it's a similar situation. Pretty much everybody in the red, although it has improved. At one point, some of them were down by 1 to 1.5% right now. The S&P 500 off by 0.34. Dow about the same, and the Nasdaq is off by 0.22. Okay. The U.S. and Israel, we all know, launched a wave of strikes against Iran over the weekend, hitting targets across the country and ultimately killing Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Oil prices spiked in the aftermath, sending shock waves through global markets. Joining us now is Eric Nuttall, President and Senior Portfolio Manager at 9 Point Partners. And Eric, thanks as always for joining us, especially on a day like this.
You bet. Happy to be with you.
We're seeing oil prices surge, not that surprising. Are they in the ballpark for where you'd expect them to be?
No, I think the reaction is slightly more muted than what many observers would have thought. It's actually incredible. Like, today is truly historic. The world has lost not just up to 20% of global oil supply with the Strait of Hormuz effectively being closed, but also 20% of global LNG. And so this is very quickly, or has quickly become, the worst case scenario for energy investors. I think the oil market has been conditioned from prior experiences to sell any geopolitical spike. The Abqaiq strike in Saudi Arabia in 2019, oil spiked, and then a couple of days later, it had given up all of their gains. I think this is a different environment today, and so all prior playbooks are not applicable. I don't think it was consensus. Like, I was in Riyadh about 3 weeks ago. It was not consensus that Iran would strike their regional neighbors. You've had very strong commentary coming from the UAE foreign minister saying the acts of striking, their infrastructure and civilians must go answered or cannot go unanswered. And so even Saudi Arabia publicly saying that they could be in the position to strike Iran. So it's not just where we sit today, which is unbelievable to any energy observer. It's where we're potentially going in the coming hours, days, and weeks. And anybody who thinks that this is a short-term event, our best intelligence has told us that Iran is sitting on about 1 month's worth of missiles, but the real threat is really drones. And so it's difficult to fathom unless there's a distinctive regime change, which seems hugely challenging, that it's going to be very difficult to have any major vessels, be it LNG or oil, going through the strait. And the world simply cannot absorb a 20% loss of global oil supply.
So what do you do with this then at this moment? I mean, we could see Iran has a month's worth of weapons that could keep the Strait shut unless the Americans and Israelis can do something about that. Where are we left with this then? How are you approaching it?
We've been adding to oil exposure this morning, which is counterintuitive. We bought liquidity where we could. We bought some stock in a company called Strathcona. We were adding to Cenovus on Friday. We just think the complacency right now, and I have to admit, obviously, this is a very, very fluid, unknown situation. Maybe it resolves itself magically tomorrow, but I think complacency is offering an opportunity. We were already very constructive on oil in the second half of this year. We thought that fears about a historic oil supply glut were overblown. What we've been talking about very publicly is U.S. shale production growth is now over. We have OPEC spare capacity. We estimate about 1.4 million barrels per day, that being fully exhausted by the end of this year. And so the setup for oil was already very positive. As an energy investor, you never want to have to count on geopolitics for a number of reasons, but this is just additive to what was already a bullish thesis for oil. And so we're searching for opportunity. We're finding the very best opportunities remain in Canada. Security of supply, be it for natural gas through LNG or oil, is more important today than it was last week. And so we really think the spotlight is going to be shone on countries, on jurisdictions where they're stable, secure suppliers of oil. Canada, we are gifted with decades worth of inventory in the oil sands, in the Clearwater, in different plays. And we don't think that the equity prices are reflective of where we think oil is either trading now or is going in the years to come.
What would it take for people to keep looking at Canada? I mean, we don't have the production capacity, do we, to meet a sudden spike in demand from the oil not getting out from the Middle East. How long would this have to go before people would look at Canada as a feasible long-term expansion?
Yeah, it all takes time. We've been very public in our views that Canada has had to critically improve its takeaway capacity. We gave a very forceful defense of that before a standing committee on Parliament Hill a few weeks ago. It's a challenge that we must rise to. A brand new 1 million barrel per day pipeline is going to take at least 8 years. The world is hurtling into an energy supply crisis before the weekend's events. There are projects underway to expand Canadian takeaway capacity by about 600,000 to 700,000 barrels per day. There's another potential one that will require presidential approval to get more Canadian oil down to the Gulf Coast. So that would be a couple-year initiative as well. But it's amazing, like within non-OPEC, so that's 2/3 of global oil supply, 74 out of the 78 countries of non-OPEC producing countries are in a permanent state of decline. And so really it's the opportunity that Canada has to address this mismatch between demand growth and supply growth when demand is expected to grow out to at least 2050. So it's just a massive, massive opportunity. We're optimistic that the change in tone out of the Carney government, where we're hoping for more action and a little less talk, that will come to be able to overcome any impasses of the coming months and start to get some real projects going, because it's our opportunity to lose at this point.
And I just want to go back to OPEC for a second. What does this mean for OPEC when you have one member launching missiles at other members? What kind of a damage would this do to that group, or will they absorb it?
Well, OPEC never talks geopolitics, and politics are always left in the hallway whenever they meet. It's difficult to see that occurring now, and to your point, one member is attacking others. I think this really shines a spotlight on how tight the oil market is. We've gone from this abundance mentality to what is very soon going to be a scarcity mentality at a time when demand growth remains very robust. The largest source of incremental supply of the past 15 years, U.S. shale is no more. And importantly, OPEC's spare capacity was always kind of that insurance policy for events like this. Well, even if you have capacity, if you can't move it because you can't get ships to put the oil on, it just speaks to just how unbelievably tight this market can become. And so we're not counting on geopolitics for our investment thesis. We're bullish just because of this mismatch between supply and demand. Mm-hmm. But we have to recognize the strategic importance and the historic importance of what's happened just in the last 24 hours. I don't think anybody ever would have contemplated the world could lose 20% of LNG supply and up to 20% of oil supply all within 24 hours. And so, again, we think complacency is offering an opportunity.
Okay, we have to wrap it up there, but Eric, thank you as always for joining us.
My pleasure.
Eric Nuttall is president and senior portfolio manager at 9 Point Partners. Up next, we'll continue our coverage of the Middle East conflict and bring you our conversation with John Allen, former ambassador for Canada to Israel. U.S. President Donald Trump announced an attack on Iran over the weekend, moving oil prices. And for more on the impact of the attack, we sat down with John Allen, former ambassador of Canada to Israel, and now a senior fellow at the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary International History at the University of Toronto.
I think a combination of factors. One was the weakness of Iran and the weakness of its proxies in the region. Obviously, Hamas had been weakened. Hezbollah had been seriously weakened. The Houthis had backed off once the ceasefire in Gaza took place. And Iran's ballistic missile defenses had been seriously harmed. I guess the other thing is that I think Bibi Netanyahu was able to convince Donald Trump that this might be an opportune time either to negotiate the end of Iran's nuclear capabilities, or if that doesn't work, to try and force a regime change or a change in policy regarding nuclear ballistic missile technology and support for proxies.
Now, we saw the leader taken out and several key figures in the government. What does the new Iran look like right now? That new the government that is on the ground there, is it one that would be open to some kind of a deal, a peace deal?
The new looks very much like the old. They have the same president who is reported to be more liberal. They have now former Supreme Court justice who is considered to be very hard line. And they have another cleric taking the place of Khomeini. So far, Iran has said they're not interested in opening up negotiations again. They were in the middle of talks when Israel and the U.S. began the bombings. President Trump has indicated that he would be open to having renewed discussions. But I think at this point, Iran is a bit wary of trusting either Trump or Netanyahu.
And now Trump called for the people of Iran to rise up. Is that realistic? And what might happen if that actually did happen?
I don't think it's realistic. He suggested that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard lay down their arms, they would be given immunity, and they should hand over their weapons. Now, who should they hand over their weapons to? Very recently, in January, approximately 30,000, according to some reports, of Iranian citizens who were protesting were brutally massacred by this same Iranian Revolutionary Guard that Trump is suggesting should lay down their arms. And I don't think they're ready to do that right now. And it's not at all clear, unless there are boots on the ground, who they're going to hand their weapons over to. I think while the Iranian people in Iran and in the diaspora are welcoming the attacks, at the same time, they're very worried about where this could go. As we know, Roger, regime change in the region, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Yemen, and Libya has not gone particularly well before. And
I just want to get your thoughts on, we're almost out of time, but Mark Carney's release on this, his statement. Thoughts on that, and where does Canada fit in with all this?
Well, I must say I was a little surprised with how full-throated the Prime Minister's support for these attacks were. In my opinion, and I think in the opinion of some others, this was not a case in which there was either the right of self-defense. There did not seem to be an imminent threat against either the U.S. or against Israel, and there was no UN Security Council authorization. So it's certainly arguable that these attacks were contrary to the UN Charter and customary law, which talks about the non-viability of states, and there are very limited reasons for conducting these attacks. So Carney, nonetheless, and despite what he had to say in Davos about opposing might is right, came out very clearly, much less nuanced than his European partners, and said that he supported this fully. Obviously, he supports the security of Israel and its right to exist, and he talked about obviously the various horrible things that this regime has done and has threatened in the past. There's no question about that. But whether or not you want to give Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu the right to decide who to attack when, I think is another issue.
That was John Allen, Senior Fellow of the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary International History at the University of Toronto. Coming up, Anthropic's clash with the Pentagon has escalated. We'll bring you more on that after the break. Anthropic's clash with the Pentagon has escalated, with the U.S. now classifying it as a supply chain risk, giving the company 6 months to exit its defense work. For more on this, we sat down with Dan Rohinton, portfolio manager at IA Global Asset Management.
I mean, and let's take a step back. So what is this all about? This is about the U.S. government's request for basically broadly unrestricted access to Anthropic's models. That's largely the deal when you're working with the government, is you don't really get to decide what they can and what they can't have, because they're a large-scale customer, and they're also,
they're also the U.S. government.
They're also the U.S. government,
yeah.
And they're also the Chinese government. So the idea that technology isn't deeply interwoven with foreign policy, I think Anthropic is probably going to be hung out to dry here, because realistically, all the Chinese labs are probably working closely with the Chinese government, and the U.S. government is demanding the same of their companies. And so terms of service, things like that, just don't make sense in the context of geopolitical competition, which is where AI has become the primary theater of this competition.
So what is Anthropic hoping to accomplish with this? How would they win out of this?
I don't think they can, because it goes back to, if you had maybe I'll frame it another way. If Anthropic was the best AI model company with by far the best models and no one else was close, then the U.S. government or any government, including Canada's, might have to compromise. But at the end of the day, they don't. They're good, they're excellent models, but they're one of several. So I think in this type of oligopolistic large language model world, I think Anthropic is going to probably be out in the desert a little bit. And I think it's interesting because it's not just this that happened more recently. Anthropic actually missed an opportunity with what was called OpenClaw or ClaudeBot, where they sent a cease and desist letter as this open source project was going viral. So it's been a rough few weeks for Anthropic, but generally speaking, what it comes down to is these are all well-funded companies. It's not the end of the world for Anthropic or OpenAI, whoever wins or loses the contracts, but the idea that we are not going to see a deep weaving of AI into all forms of the government, and that's across Canada, US, and China especially, is a preposterous notion. So I think I'm surprised it happened so soon, Roger, but I'm not surprised that it is happening.
Could you see Anthropic try and come back to the table with its tail between its legs?
Yeah, depends how much they want the contract. Because remember, there was a time where Google had this kerfuffle with the US government as well.
Yeah.
Eventually, it just all sides come around to, well, these are big customers and they also are the ones with the military that are protecting us. So
it's good to do business with us.
It's good to do business.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So who moves in there then?
I think it's probably going to be OpenAI or xAI, because xAI, basically Elon Musk's enterprises, have a lot of arrangements with the Pentagon already, or Palantir and a bunch of the others. So there's lots of competitors on the field. But I think the key message to really see here is AI is such an important technology that in even what seems like such a primitive, we're in such the primitives of where AI is going, and it's already being brought as a front and center geopolitical and geostrategic issue. This tells you how prolific it has the potential to be, which is why the big nation states are basically saying, we want you fully under the tent. Anthropic, probably going to be left out in the cold. They'll probably die on this hill for this contract, but who knows what the next two contracts will look like.
And how important is it to you, do you feel, that the government has control over AI, that it's putting it, like more control than Anthropic wanted to give up?
I mean, it's an interesting conundrum, right?
Yeah.
So on one side, you can say that the government should not have control of this technology, but then you're effectively outsourcing the control of the technology to Dario and his 6 co-founders. So do you want a standing committee of 6 people making decisions on important tech, or do you want the government to make decisions on important tech? I don't think there's a great answer.
No, there isn't. There isn't on that. I'm sitting and thinking about both. No.
Yeah. So it's not that saying no to the government is some moral high ground to stand on, because then you're effectively saying, imagine if the CEO of Coca-Cola could make all the important decisions in America. I don't think we'd want that either, because that represents dictatorship. So it's tough morally, it's a tough conundrum, and there's no great answer. But at the end of the day, I think the important point, which tells you the importance of this technology, is just so fast this became a national security issue. And I'm confident it's a national security issue for every other government around the world.
Has it grown too fast? Do you think, can they get their head around it? Can governments get their heads around AI?
I hope so.
Or is the horse out of the barn for it?
I think the horses are firmly out of the barn and they're running far into the fields, and every government is trying to catch them, because there's a knowledge gap between where the bleeding edge of the technology is, how it's distilled to the rest of the population, and where the government is in terms of its understanding of the technology and its potential. So I think we are well past, the horses are in the field, there might be going to a different meadow. I'm losing track of the analogy, because we are that far removed from where the knowledge gap with the government really is.
And that was Dan Rohinton, portfolio manager at IA Global Asset Management. Coming up, we'll speak to one of Canada's most prominent mining executives on the ground at the PDAC. Stay with us. Oil prices are surging. They're up 6.25 right now, hitting their highest level in more than 4 years as conflict in the Middle East escalates. Tanker traffic through the Straits of Hormuz has come to a halt. The strait handles as much as 20% of the world's oil shipments, and some experts say a halt lasting more than 25 days could cause storage tanks in the region to fill, forcing a cut in production. And taking a look at some of the movers and shakers today, you can see defense stock rallying. Lockheed Martin up 2.13%, Northrop Grumman 4.4%, and Palantir up by 5.86%, all on this geopolitical uncertainty, the escalating tensions in the Middle East with that attack launched by the U.S. and Israel over the weekend, and of course, Iran's response to it. And moving on, Canada's manufacturing activity picked up for a second straight month in February, helped by rising volumes. Data from S&P Global shows new orders rose for the first time in more than a year, despite softening export sales and ongoing challenges from U.S. tariffs. S&P Global also notes that Canadian manufacturers are upbeat about their overall prospects for output growth this year, marking the highest level of optimism since December of 24. And quick peek at the markets. This is where the TSX kind of looks like it's going to sit most of the day. Barely into the red, then barely into the green. It's barely into the green right now, up by 0.13%. South of the border, things are calming down there. They're still off, but at one point they were off more than a point for most of those. S&P 500 down 0.43, the Dow by 0.54, and the NASDAQ by 0.3. All right, let's head back down to Andrew Bell. He is on the floor of the PDAC Mineral Exploration and Mining Convention, chatting with the people who shape Canada's resource sector, including the CEO of North Arrow Minerals. And Andrew, take it away, sir.
I'm here with the woman herself, Ira Thomas. She's been called the Queen of Diamonds. Sorry, Ira. But of course, she was famous for her role in developing a Diavik diamond deposit and Stornoway. More recently, she headed up Lucara Diamond in Botswana. She's kind of out of diamonds, broadly speaking, for now. You've got so many irons in the fire. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're
Thank you very much.
CEO of North Arrow Minerals right
yes,
now.
Yes, I am. That's right.
What's the main thing that North Arrow has going on?
Well, we're excited to be exploring an entire greenstone belt situated in southern Botswana. And Archean greenstone belts, of course, are known globally for their endowment of all types of metals and minerals. And this one hasn't had a lot of attention. So we're excited to be going in and trying to understand the opportunity here.
But it's covered in Kalahari sand?
That is the challenge, and that is the reason it hasn't had much attention.
Yes.
So yes, we're using kind of modern technology to try and see beneath sand cover, a combination of remote sensing techniques that we collect using airborne drones. And then we also have a proprietary sort of drilling setup, which means we can rapidly drill our sea holes. And last year, for just over $1 million, we drilled 175 holes and covered the whole belt, more than 70 kilometers almost, with airborne mags. So very cost-effective exploration, and we found 6 anomalous areas that we're now following up. So early days, but we're excited.
And then you're also invested in West Haven Gold. We just talked to them earlier, working on a possible mine in BC.
Yes, super excited about that one as well. I think when you think about the market that we're in today, obviously very strong gold prices, and I think for investors it's really about picking companies that really have a chance of seeing their projects through to the finish line during this gold cycle. And what I really love about what West Haven's doing is that we're now on the track to full-scale feasibility and ultimately a production decision. We're continuing to explore. And then I have a third project that I'm involved in Alaska that is also gold, that has the potential to get through in this cycle.
Tectonic minerals.
That is tectonic metals, yes.
Oh yeah, metals, sorry. And what is it like at $5,000 plus gold? Do you just have money being offered to you?
Well, it's a big change from where we were even a year ago, particularly in the junior space. I mean, we've seen buoyant gold prices now for a while. That's really impacted the majors and the mid-caps, but finally that money is now flowing into the juniors, and so money is readily available, and Tectonic is a case in point. We wanted to go out and raise about $30 million to advance a new discovery in Alaska. That was, dramatically oversubscribed, and we're now going to close on 92 million versus the 30 we went out to the market for. So it's a real testament that there's appetite for good quality projects in good jurisdictions with good management teams.
I suppose there's a risk that deposits that are marginal, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but with this high gold price, things look attractive.
True, but again, I think there's a lot of good quality projects that have lacked attention. So I think we're not at the stage where it's so frothy that we're looking at the bottom of the barrel yet. I think there's a lot of good quality projects that still have not had their day in the sun. West Haven would be a case in point, and I think Tectonic is also just getting going. And of course, North Arrow is at the very earliest part of the value curve there. We're just starting our drilling campaign. So I do think there's value opportunities throughout, but investors have to be discerning, there's no question.
How deep are the Kalahari sands you'll have to deal with there?
Well, you know what, I'm glad you asked me that, because a lot of people think of these sands as being up hundreds of meters thick, and in the areas where we've been making some early discoveries, we're dealing with sand cover that's less than 10 meters.
Oh, okay.
So that's very manageable in a mining situation. So not too deep.
Do you detect a buzz with copper near record highs and gold near record highs at this year's PDAC?
It's incredible. I mean, it's always, Anthony Vaccaro from the Northern Miner was at an event the other night for the young mining professionals, and he opened his introductions with, we finally made it. Like we're now cool. Mining is cool again, and yes, there's an incredible buzz. I think everybody around the world recognizes that we really are going to need minerals of all sorts to be able to, make the big energy transition, and of course. And we've got a geopolitical environment, which, unfortunately, is also fueling this positive momentum. So it's a very, very interesting time to be in the minerals and exploration and development business.
I guess what we forget, our economies, our societies run on real things, not just apps and AI.
Yes, absolutely. And your smartphone, I forget the number, but there's something like 36 different minerals that are critical to operating your smartphone. So that, I think, has become front and center in kind of what mining means today, and particularly for younger generations, because we're trying to attract them into the space. When you look around this convention, I'm sure it's not lost on you that there's a lot of gray hairs.
Yes.
And so we are finally in a position where we're getting some attention from young future leaders and really young people of all ilk, whether you're a geologist, whether you're in finance, whether you're in legal, whether you're in environmental sciences.
Will you ever quit, Ira? Will you just keep going?
Not anytime soon. This is more fun than a lot of time. It's been a bit of a slog over the last few years. So no, I'm delighted to still be able to do what I love, which is to continue to treasure hunt for minerals that the world needs.
And when you were running Lucara Diamond, of course they produced in Botswana. You were living in Antwerp, Belgium?
I was, yes.
How did you like that?
You know what? I loved it. It was a completely different perspective. It was great to be in the same time zone as the mine, and it made travel a lot easier. You also, to sort of gain the European perspective was helpful.
Ira, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ira Thomas, legend of mining and CEO of North Arrow Minerals. Back to you live from PDAC.
All right, thank you, Andrew Bell. He'll have more coming up throughout the day, but also coming up, Canada and India resetting bilateral ties with a plan to finalize a trade deal this year. We'll discuss Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to India after the break. Canada and India have committed to finalizing a new trade deal by the end of this year. Prime Minister Mark Carney's first official visit to India also saw the signing of a $2.6 billion uranium supply deal. For more on this reset of bilateral ties after months, even a couple of years, really, of diplomatic tension, is Veena Najibullah, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Veena, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Roger.
This is quite the about face. Can Canada and India overcome their differences? I mean, they were not liking each other just a few months ago, even.
Absolutely. This is a huge turnaround, one which would have been hard to imagine a few weeks ago, not to mention last year. And we've seen not just a diplomatic reset, but a significant expansion and elevation of the relationship and a focus on economic partnership with this announcement on a negotiation of a free trade agreement, a very ambitious timeline for doing so in 1 year. But the relationship was not just going to be limited, according to Prime Minister Carney, to trade and economic engagement, but also to defense, to technology, AI. He wants to see this relationship really expand because the economic opportunity and the economic logic is very much there. But of course, we'll see what the implementation actually looks like. The blueprint, the roadmap that he's laid out is ambitious.
What might derail it?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of domestic political challenges. This, in some ways, has been a tale of two visits. If you follow what was happening in Mumbai and New Delhi, the mood was very positive. The feeling was that the two countries have really turned the page, that the economic logic is just so overwhelming that they are going to move forward, not just with SEPA, but also partnerships around energy. In fact, they announced a strategic partnership on energy, signed multiple MOUs, have all of these deals. You mentioned the Cameco deal, but there are other deals amounting in total to about $5.5 billion. And yet the story here in Canada has been one still of foreign interference, transnational repression, lots of questions about why are we doing this with India. So I think a lot will depend on how the Prime Minister and the government are able to communicate clearly what their vision for India is, how they're going to be able to fully capitalize on the economic opportunity, which is enormous, and not just in energy, but across the board. At the same time, managing this public safety concerns and the sort of the public perceptions that still exist that are fairly negative about India.
It is a bit of a tightrope with that. What are some of the opportunities beyond the energy then? Where do you see those happening?
Yeah, so I mean, energy for sure, and that's across the board, both conventional liquefied natural gas as well as oil, critical minerals, as well as hydrogen and renewables. Then we have technology, AI, IT, including research partnerships. So much of our trade with India right now is trade and services, which has been really foreign students. But now there is an appetite to increase financial services, increase services around exchange around AI. They launched a trilateral partnership between Canada, Australia, and India, which is our first one in the Indo-Pacific. So there are definitely opportunities there. And then most interestingly and surprisingly, perhaps, our defense minister was on the trip as well. And given our new defense industrial strategy, there is an appetite to cooperate with India, even in defense. So space, airspace were specifically mentioned. This is a new area. We'll see how quickly things move. But of course, India, like so many other countries, is spending billions on its defense and security upgrade.
And what might derail it? We have all these incredible opportunities, but what might be the issues? You mentioned about the politics of this, the optics of it. Is that something that can be worked through?
Yes, I mean, certainly the government would like to see this move in two parallel tracks, the kind of security law enforcement on one dedicated track, and then all the partnership economic opportunities, deepening of the relationship on a parallel track. I think another element would be whether or not we're able to fully take advantage of the opportunities, because India feels far away to many. It's obviously not easy to get there. It's also not always easy to do business there. So I think raising the competence among Canadian business and the Canadian public, as well as government, about India, how India is changing. This is not India of even 5 years ago. In the last 2 years, India has signed free trade agreements with the UK, with the European Union, with the European Free Trade Association, EFTA, with New Zealand. So they're now moving quickly. And if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, Canadian businesses might be placed out of the market that is now one of the fastest in the world.
Okay, we have to wrap it up there, but Veena, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Veena Najibullah is Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. We'll have more coming up after the break. And let's go to Washington, where U.S. President Donald Trump is speaking.
Terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development and make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to stop them from making these highly forbidden by us nuclear weapons. We were the ones that were complaining. We were the ones that wanted it stopped. But everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat. I was very proud to have knocked out the Iran nuclear deal by President Barack Hussein Obama. That was a horrible, horrible, dangerous document. They would have had nuclear weapons 3 years ago, and they would have used them. But I'll not let that happen. For almost 47 years, this regime has been attacking the United States and killing Americans. Every time you see someone with missing arms and legs or a face that's been absolutely shattered violently, it was almost certainly caused by an Iran roadside bomb. They were put there by General Soleimani, who was the father of the roadside bomb. Very proudly, he thought, but I terminated him in my first term. This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. They were on the road to getting one legitimately through a deal that was signed foolishly by our country. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders. And we thought we had a deal, but then they backed out, and they came back, and we thought we had a deal, and they backed out. I said, you can't deal with these people. You got to do it the right way. Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. We have the strongest and most powerful, by far, military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody actually said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored. If I got bored, I wouldn't be standing here right now, I guarantee you that, to go through what I had to go through. We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership, and as you know, that was done in about an hour, so we're ahead of schedule there by a lot. But please join me in thanking every American service member who bravely is standing in harm's way. They really are incredible, and I just want to thank you. We have a lot of them right here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We have a lot of great service members here with us, too, in this beautiful building. Isn't it beautiful? We're adding on to the building a little bit. We're improving the building. See that nice drape? When that comes down right now, you see a very, very deep hole. But in about a year and a half from now, you're going to see a very, very beautiful building. And there's your entrance to it.
You've been listening to President Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, addressing the media at the White House at a ceremony for service members, acknowledging what unfolded over the weekend, saying it was happening. He said Iran ignored orders not to continue their nuclear program. They were building ICBMs as well, and that they would prevail when it comes to this war, but no time frames or anything like that. So right now, we still don't have a lot of information on what is next in Iran and in the Middle East. We have seen oil refineries in Saudi Arabia hit, and other damage in Kuwait and Bahrain and places like that. So they've all been part of the targets by Iran. So we'll have to see what happens. This could escalate. The Straits of Hormuz closed as well. Right now, the markets are reacting somewhat muted, I guess. You can see the TSX actually up right now, 0.32%. And energies are gaining right now, but airlines, Air Canada, one of the ones taking a hit today over the concern about the fuel prices that have jumped overnight, and a lot of people worried about airlines and travel taking a hit. Down on Wall Street, it's a different situation down there. Look at the spin. Look at all the change all of a sudden on the U.S. markets. They've been down all morning, literally till about 15 minutes ago, and now you can see the S&P 500 virtually awash. The Dow is still in the red. It's off by 0.14, but the NASDAQ has spun the other way, and it's up by 0.37%. Defense stocks pushing a lot of that right now. And that is it for us here. Thank you for watching Morning Markets. We'll see you back here tomorrow.